So just the picture that you can see now, that's the glacier that I study in Canada. And so this is me. So I am a scientist. I study mountain glaciers and mountain hydrology. And so I'm halfway done with my doctorate degree. So I have I'm still a student, but I study in science and I study mountain and water. So most of my days, I spend a lot of time outside, but I do a lot of, I give talks, I talk to people like I'm doing now, or I go to conferences. So I travel to go talk about glaciers that melt and water and hydrology. But really, most of my time, I'm at my computer. I do a lot of writing. I make figures. I analyze data, and that is really what most of my work is computer work. So this is where I work. This is where I live in Canada. I'm in the mountains on the western side of the continent, and this green part of the building, that's my office. So we're quite lucky because we are in the mountains, and it's very beautiful. I really, really like it. Yeah. So what do I do for work? So as on my first slide, this is my glacier. And if you look on the black little image at the bottom right of the picture, that is Canada. And the red point is where this glacier is. So on the west side, but I'm from Quebec, so I come from the other side of the country, but I moved here to work. So this is the glacier that I study, and I try to understand how it melts and how it behaves and how all around it also. So I don't just study the glacier, I also study the cliffs and the rocks and the little lake in the middle, and I try to understand how all of that together works and how it melts and where the water goes, for example. And so why do I do this? The main reason is that this glacier is melting really fast. So the lake, before in 2005, so 15 years ago, the glacier was all the way into the lake. So there was no lake, it was all ice. And now the glacier is already retreated quite a lot, and it's going to keep going. So we're trying to understand how fast it's melting. And that is important because when the glacier melts, it produces water, and the water goes into the rivers further down, and it's really important for the people and the animals and the plants that live below the glacier. There's not many animals or plants up on this glacier, as you can see on the picture. There's not much except ice and rocks, but when it melts, it travels down the mountain, and then it's really important. So then when there won't be any glaciers left here, there will be less water. So we really want to understand how fast it's changing and how much it's changing. Because the water that comes from this glacier, it goes to a lot of places. So for example, it goes into the lakes that we use for canoeing or kayaking or fishing. It goes further down to where we have agriculture and we grow wheat or crops. It also goes into hydropower dams to generate electricity. Obviously, it goes to drinking water, and it makes its way to cities. So we have some cities that are quite far away, so hundreds of kilometers away, but they have water that comes from the glaciers. So if we want to know how all of these things will change, we need to know how the glacier will change. It's also the glaciers are also important for the animals. So we don't have many animals living right up here, right on the ice, but in the mountains, there's quite a lot of animals. So I've just put pictures of a few here. This one is a pika. It's a little bit like a rabbit, but it's made for the mountains, so where it's colder and there's lots of snow. This is a wolverine. They're very, like Wolverine X-Men. Yeah. They are very rare and hard to see, so I've never seen one. It actually sometimes cross the glaciers to travel to other places. Wow. This is a grizzly bear. You've probably heard of bears before. They're really big and scary. but really they just want to go and eat berries and plants. They just don't want to be disturbed. This is a mountain goat. It lives up in the mountains. They're hard to see because they're white, so they blend in the snow. And this is a marmot. So all of these I have seen in the mountains except the wolverine, because the wolverines are rare. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of diversity in the mountains for animals, just not in glaciers. So when I study glacier hydrology, typically the first thing we do is we think about what we're going to do and we make a plan. But then we go in the mountains and we go and we collect data. So here on the picture in the blue sky, that is a weather station. So it measures the wind, it measures the amount of sunlight, it measures the depth of the snow, and it measures the amount of rainfall or snowfall that occurs. And so we have weather stations like this all over the mountains, and it records the weather, and then we use that data to better understand what is going on. But sometimes we also go, when we go to maintain and work on the weather station, we go and we camp in the mountains. So this is 2 years ago, we spent a week camping on the glacier to measure the thickness of the ice. So we skied all the way around with this radar that would travel through the ice and tell us how deep it is. And we also go in the summer and we have a bunch of other equipment. So it's not always in the snow. Sometimes it's warm. It's not always cold. So then once we have the data, we come back and we do computer work. So lots of time coding, writing like computer science, writing scripts to analyze the data, making maps to better understand what is going on, trying to understand the different process. And that is really where a lot of my time is spent, is looking at the data that I collected in the field. And then the third part, which is also very important, is then we talk about what we've done with other scientists. So we go to meetings where we present our work. So this is a meeting 2 years ago. We have posters that we make where we have our findings and what we've done, and we can then chat with the other scientists. This is a presentation that I gave a few years ago to a room to talk about my work. And it's also, that's where we interact with a lot of other scientists to share our ideas and ask questions, and sometimes things didn't work and we can try to figure out why. So there was a few questions about how I became a hydrologist and how long I've been doing this. So this glacier here, the one that I've been talking about so far, I've been studying for about 3 years for my doctorate degree, so it's based on this one location. But I have been studying glaciers and hydrology for about 10 years since I started university. So now I'm 29 and I started university at 19, I guess. Yeah. So it's been about 10 years that I've been doing this. And so before I studied this glacier, I studied a glacier in Peru, on the other side of the Amazon forest from you guys. So I was in the Cordillera Blanca in northern-ish Peru. And so this is the glacier I studied. And we took pictures of it with a camera that measures temperature. So instead of just having a picture with colors, each color gives us temperature. So for example, here the blue is cold and the red is hot. And that's what I worked on. And it was very beautiful and I liked it a lot. But I also studied the water in the valleys. I did not just study the glaciers. So these are pictures from the time I was in Peru. So we had computers in the field. We were measuring how much water was in the river, like in this picture here. We were taking samples. And we were also doing some seismic surveys, lots of hammering metal. And this is the highest mountain I climbed. It was when I was in Peru. It was not quite for work. It was for fun after the work was done. I took vacation. It was about 6,000 meters, just over.
Oh.
It was very nice. But for work, we worked at up to about 5,000 meters. And that was really hard because I come from a place that is at about 0 meter above sea level. So it was high and there was not a lot of oxygen, and it was very tiring. But very beautiful. Yeah, very beautiful though. So who do I work with in terms of in my science? I mostly work with my professor. So I have one professor that is in charge of my studies. So I work with him a lot, but I also work with the other students that also study glaciers around here. And then outside of that, I work with other scientists that study different things. So I study the glacier, but I work with someone that studies the fish in the river, or someone that studies the weather patterns. So then all together, but it all comes together so we understand the whole story. Sometimes I would also work with journalists or writers. So sometimes they want to write about glaciers in the newspaper. So then they will ask us, can you tell us about this, so they can have the right information. And sometimes I also work with other hydrologists. So either that work for the government, or sometimes people that develop new instruments and new sensors to better study the glaciers. So if someone is trying to develop a new weather station, then we might work with them to help them develop it. I really like this question. What was my biggest adventure for work? And my biggest adventure was that I got to go to Svalbard, which is in the Arctic, really far north. So you guys live about here. I live about here. And so I got to go quite far north to take a class. I was doing a university class in the mountain, in the Arctic. So I lived there for a month, and it was very cool. We took Skidoos, or snowmobiles, which are a little bit like mini cars. To travel over snow, they have skis in the front and track in the back, and you can travel. We got to go see some glaciers.
We saw that in our textbook. Do you remember, guys? We saw that in the textbook about Russia, a video about Russia and the reindeers in Russia. Do you remember? The snowmobile? Yeah, great.
So we used them. It was awesome. We got to see glaciers. So that's a person here. So it just gives you an idea how big the ice is. And
I thought it was a seal.
No, it was a person.
Okay.
And so it's so far north, there's actually not a single tree there's no trees. It's just rocks everywhere and grass. So this is a little mountain next to the village. The village is down here, and you can see just no trees. And in this island, there are more polar bears than humans. So it's quite incredible. And it was beautiful.
And dangerous.
Yeah, so you have to be very careful. We all had to learn how to use guns to protect ourselves, and you're not allowed to leave the town without proper training. And I did not see any polar bears. So there were some, but I didn't see any, which I'm okay with. It's safer that way. But while I was there was a solar eclipse.
Wow.
So this picture was taken around noon, so at lunchtime, but the moon went in front of the sun and blocked the sunlight, and everything got dark, and then it got light again. And so that was really, really cool.
Imagine at 12 o'clock. At 12 o'clock in the middle of the day, and the solar eclipse. How nice.
Yeah, it was great. And so I would say that was I do a lot of work in the mountains, so I go on a lot of work-related adventure. But this was definitely quite something. The best part of my job when so what I really like about being a scientist is that I get to ask questions and answer the questions I find interesting. So I'm trying to understand how this one glacier melts, as I want to study that, so then I find a way to better understand it. And that is something I really like about science. Be curious and follow your idea. There's no one telling you exactly what you're supposed to study. You get to decide, and I really like that. And then I also really like doing field work, so going in the mountains, like this one, the picture in the middle, that is in Peru. I also been to Alaska for work. And then I also get to travel quite a lot. So this group picture was a class I took in Finland, which was very, very fun. I got to meet a lot of people from around the world. And then this last year, this picture of me, I got to go to the United Nations to talk about glaciers. So that, I thought that was very, very cool. But these are the kind of opportunities I was able to get because I'm a scientist. So that's definitely my favorite part of my job. And if I have to talk about the best part, I also have to mention the worst part of the job, because otherwise it's not fair. I would say that for me, the most difficult part is writing. So we do a lot of writing as scientists, because you have to write about what you want to do, and then once you've done it, you have to write about what you did. And sometimes I just don't want to be writing. Sometimes I would rather be playing outside or watching movies, but I have to sit down and try to find the right words, and it's very not fun sometimes. And sometimes also I have a problem and I don't know how to solve it. And what you do in science is that you ask questions that no one else has asked before. So sometimes no one knows the solution. So I can't just ask someone else to do it, because no one knows, and I have to find a solution. And sometimes that can be quite hard, but it's also very exciting. So how did I become a hydrologist? So I really like the cold and the snow. I grew up skiing in Quebec, and I always really liked winter, and I really like being outside. So I decided to study earth sciences, so trying to understand how the world works, but the natural world, not humans, just plants grow, how mountains form, why is it warmer in Brazil than in Canada? These kind of, I wanted to understand that. So I decided to study that in university. And then I went to the mountains on vacation and saw my first glacier. And they were just so beautiful. I really liked them. So when I went back to school, I decided to try to learn more about glaciers. So I took classes that had glaciers in them, or hydrology, because glaciers and water. And the more I learned about mountains and glacier and hydrology, the more I wanted to know. So I found a professor at my university who studied mountain glaciers and water. I went to his office and I knocked on his door and I asked him if I could help him, if I could work for him. And he said yes. So I started doing a little bit of work, like a few hours a week. And from then, I realized I really liked it, and I just kept going. And really what made it decide that I wanted to study water and glaciers, I wanted to work on something that is important to people. And water is so important. Without water, there is no life. So it helped me study something that I find fascinating and beautiful and really interesting, but it's also really important, because on the days where you're tired and grumpy and you don't want to work, if I work on something that I know is important, it's easier, because I know I'm trying to help other people. But also, I had great teachers and professors that encouraged me to keep studying and help me to better understand how to apply for things and how to do the work. And that was really helpful. And my uncle is a glaciologist, so my uncle also studies glaciers. So I enlisted, which is important, because when I was younger, I never really thought that you could be a scientist. I knew you could be a teacher, a lawyer, a doctor, a mechanic,
firefighter,
but I never thought that you could study trees or plants or snow, for example. That never crossed my mind. And when I was young, I thought that my uncle was an explorer because he went to the mountains and he went to Antarctica. And the only reason to go to Antarctica is if you're an explorer, or I thought. And then later I learned that he was a scientist, and I thought maybe I could do that too. And that really helped, because otherwise I would never have thought that you can study something like that and that can be your life. But if I was not a hydrologist, I would probably be a filmmaker or a journalist, because I really like telling stories about how things work and how the world works. And there are so many interesting things going on in the world that I think people should know about. So I would probably try to tell stories. And if I did not study hydrology, I would probably study trees, because forests are very cool. Like, trees are alive and they grow, and I find it fascinating. Maybe because there's no trees where I work right now. So a few more things. I have never been to Brazil, but I have a coworker that I work with a lot who's from close to Sao Paulo, or went to university in Sao Paulo. So I hear a lot about Brazil. He tells me a lot about it, and it seems cool. And someone asked me if I had a message to pass on, and I would say that being curious is really important, but being curious alone isn't enough. So you really have to work hard and be bold. Take the opportunities that you can to be able to work on that curiosity too, because otherwise you can be curious but you have nowhere to go. Yeah, and that is it for me. I'm willing to answer questions.
Wow, very good job. I was checking the questions here, and I think you answered all of them.
Great.
Congratulations. Great. Excellent job. I think there is only the questions made by Bruno. I'm not sure if I sent you, because he sent me a little later. Let's see, Bruno, can you ask your question, Bruno?
Oh, have you ever told Outmarket Monday?
No, the two ones that we sent in the group with the PDF file. About 50 years.
Do you think? Yeah. Do you think in about 50 years there may not be species than on glaciers?
I think that in 50 years there will be less species, or there will be less animals, because there will be less water. So the species will still exist, maybe, but it will not do as well as it does now. Especially for fishes, because glacier water is really cold because it's ice that melts. So it makes the rivers that come from glaciers really cold. And some fish they can only live in cold water. So when the glaciers disappear, the water will be warmer because they won't be glaciers. So then the fish won't be able to live in that water and they will die. And for grizzly bears, for example, the temperature of the water, it doesn't matter. But for some fish, it's really important.
Yes, and if the bears eat fish, then it matters for them.
Yeah. Everything is connected.
Yeah. Very nice. And there is another one. How often do you go to the mountains? I think that would be one every day.
Well, because I live in the mountains. Actually, I can see them out my window right now. So I go every day. But for work, we go. We have to go twice a year for sure. We have to go at the end of the winter, or how much snow is on the ground, and we go at the end of the summer to see how much the glacier has melted. So twice for sure, but we often go in the summer. We go every 3 weeks to see how things are going, to make sure everything is working fine.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm curious. Could you explain that graph, that heat graph about Peru?
Oh yeah. So I can probably put it back on. It's going to be easier. So,
because I was trying to imagine, is that like a volcano together with the mountain range? What is it?
This, and then I'll go in presenter mode. Screen share.
And guys, the students, if you have any questions, you can prepare so you can ask the questions after that, okay?
So this is a picture of the glacier. So the blue is this mountain here, and then the more wide part is right in the middle, and the dark red is the rock
so
around.
It's not a picture from the upside. It's a picture.
It's not for above. It's a picture from across.
Across. Okay.
So it's the picture that's taken. It's taken with this camera on the picture.
Ah, right. Now it makes sense.
Yeah, and so we were looking at how it's quite a simple idea. If there's a hot rock heated by the sun next to a glacier, the glacier will melt more because next to it is something really warm. It's like if you leave the butter next to the stove, it will melt. But it's actually really hard to measure because you can't really go next to the glacier. It's a cliff and it's hard to access. So with a camera like this, we can actually measure things that we know existed, but we could never really measure them before. And now with a camera like this, taking this kind of temperature images, we can measure it for the first time. Does that help?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. I was trying to imagine from above.
From above is more common with satellites, but satellites are very, each image is really broad, so you don't see details. You only see, oh, there's a mountain here, but you don't see, oh, there's a lake, and there's a little bit of a glacier. So so that's the main problem with satellites. Yeah. It's just they're really far away.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Very nice. So let's see if they have any questions for you. Would you like to ask any questions, class? You can raise your physical hands or your electronic hands. Go ahead, don't be afraid.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
I want to know, what's the temperature in Brazil right now?
Good question. Who would like to answer?
It's like 22.
22 degrees Celsius?
I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's 7 degrees here.
7? Wow.
Yeah, it's cold.
But it's getting warmer there, right? It's getting colder here.
Oh, it's winter for you, or fall?
Almost, yeah. Almost winter.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right. And you are getting to your summer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Very good question. Where's your video, Paul? Okay. Very good question. And here, there aren't so many differences between summer and winter. The biggest difference, I mean, in temperature, it varies only 10 degrees, like from 17 to 27.
Yeah.
Little variation. Unless some few days that we have heat waves or extreme cold weather, but it's never less than 12 and more than 35. So what about there, where you live? What's the variation?
In the winter, it's about -10, but it can be as cold as -30.
Wow.
Yeah, and in the summer, it's around 20, and it can go up to 25.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because we are in the mountains, so it's colder. If you go out of the mountain, it can be 40 degrees in the summer.
And here, the main difference is the rain. In the summer, it rains. So not only the summer, but a little before and a little after the summer. And in the winter, it's dry. So a little before and a little after the winter, it's dry. So we have basically 2 seasons, the wet season and the dry season.
Okay. Now here, it rains in the summer and snows in the winter, but it's really the temperature difference that impacts it. I like when it's snowing more than when it's raining, because when it's snow, you can still go outside. You don't get wet. It's just colder. And when it's raining, you can't. It's just. But the cold is not bad. You just need gloves and a good jacket, and you're fine.
Yeah. Great. I think Amanda would like to live in Canada, isn't it right, Amanda? Yes, Amanda told me once.
Yeah, and Atul said that here in Brazil is never more than 27 degrees Celsius, but not in Rio. Rio de Janeiro is
Rio's hotter.
hot, really hot. In the summer, for example, it's like 40 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, okay.
So in Canada is what, Fahrenheit?
Celsius.
Celsius. Oh.
Yeah, we're the same as the United States is Fahrenheit and miles.
Yeah, great. So 40 degrees Celsius. So it's really hot here in Rio.
Yeah, it's like that in.
So I wish I could, live in Canada like you.
Yeah, it's in Montreal. It gets to 40 degrees in Quebec, in Montreal, but here, no.
What is the name of the city you're living now?
I live in Kenmore.
Kenmore.
Would you be able to send us the slideshow, or is that like?
Oh yeah, I can send it to you. No, I can send it. I'll email it to you.
Okay, great. Because then we can work on the questions and the vocabulary and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Very good. Now, guys, you are free to ask other questions. It can be about anything, about education, food, culture, music. Go wild.
So I really like Harry Potter. I just rewatched all the movies 2 weeks ago. Someone mentioned that I liked it. And I just learned what K-pop is. Yeah, I did not know any, so I thought I would say that.
Very good. But who likes Harry Potter here? I think nobody likes it. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Paul and Isabel. Isabel, like, isn't it horrible, Isabel?
Oi, teacher.
Isn't Harry Potter a horrible thing?
Oh, so I think no, but I love it. It's beautiful. I love it.
And I think you visited something about Harry Potter last year. Where did you go?
Yes, I go to Island of Adventure and Universal Studios, and have some things of Harry Potter, and I love it. I read the fifth, né? Estou aqui no livro, teacher. Então, eu não sei falar, mas enfim.
Yes, five books of the collection.
Yes.
Nice. Awesome.
And last year, while you were traveling on your road trip in the United States, you got a very heavy blizzard. Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
In March?
In Boston.
February or March?
January. Yes.
Last year in Boston. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Boston gets crazy storms.
Okay. So I would like to ask you something very personal. Maybe you have an answer for that or not. Let's see. What is one of your fondest memories from childhood? Do you remember? What's something you remember fondly? That's hard.
It is, well, most of my good memories involve snow and skiing. I really, really liked snow. I remember my parents giving me snowshoes at Christmas one year, and I was so happy because when we went outside, we went cross-country skiing, and cross-country skiing is very confusing. The ski, like, I would keep falling over, and I found it very difficult, and they gave me snowshoes, which are more like walking, and that I could do, and I was just so happy. Yeah.
Because you could finally walk in the snow and not fall all the time.
Exactly, and then you fall, and there's snow in your gloves and in your neck, and yeah. And
I've never seen snow. How many of the students have seen the snow? Only Isabella? Have you ever seen snow in person? Bruno, Leo, Paola, Pedro, Marina? No? Not even Amanda, yes. I went to the coldest weather that I faced was in Ireland, but it hardly ever snows there.
There is, so my coworker who's from Brazil, he lived on this island of the coast that has snow sometimes in the mountains.
Right.
I never remember the name.
Probably
but
in the south.
At first I did not believe him because there's no snow in Brazil. But he was like, yeah, like every year a little bit.
Do you remember, Amanda? Is that where you went once? So let me unmute you. Let's see, what's the name of the city?
I think it's Gramado, Canela, in the south, extreme south of Brazil. Yeah, but I went there once, but I was not lucky because I didn't see in that year, it didn't snow, but I saw artificial snow because they have their like ski
resort
station.
Okay.
But it's artificial snow, not real. So that was the most close I ever had to snow.
Very nice.
Yeah, no, where I'm from, and here too, from mid-November until early April, it's snow. There's snow on the ground, it's cold, and you do sports that include snow. So it's part of who we are.
Yeah.
And I cannot imagine living in a place with no snow. I don't, yeah.
Yeah. And it was interesting to see that even in Peru, you had a lot of snow to play around.
Yeah, if you go high enough, because it gets cold.
Yeah. And I had a question about your article, I think, about snow safety. How can we protect ourselves in the snow? Are there any specific pieces of advice?
Yeah, well, the first thing is to be ready for the cold. So you always have a lot of warm layers. But that would be similar that how do you make sure you don't get sunburns in the sun? So it's the same idea. You have to be ready with extra gloves and extra jackets and things like that. And then something else that is quite specific to the mountains is avalanches. So avalanches are a little bit like a landslide, but with snow. So the snow adds up on a slope, and at some point it slides, and it can bury you, and then you could die with the snow above you. So we have to take classes on how to be safe and how to travel in the mountains and what to do if something happens.
How to identify the avalanche risk.
Yeah. But, I mean, it sounds scary, and it is scary, but I think no matter where you are, there's some kind of risk. Like, every time I go south, and there's venomous toads and snakes. We don't have snakes here, and I am terrified of
only bears,
spiders, snakes.
Yeah.
So you have to learn which animals are dangerous or which plant not to eat, and we have to learn how to stay safe in the cold and in the snow.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
And here there are landslides, especially in the wet season, and especially because of the miners. They have a lot of dump, and then sometimes they don't protect, they don't fix the dump area very well, so many people can die from the dump slide.
Yeah.
Very nice. So do you have any questions for Caroline? Pedro?
Why did you choose this profession?
So just in a few words,
Yeah.
because there is that in the slideshow, but we can go back there later. But just in a few words, what would you say, Caroline?
Because I liked water and snow, and I was curious.
Very nice. Great. Thank you very much. Marina, do you have any new questions? Oh, Marina does.
Yes. What interested you to be a scientist?
Can you repeat that?
What encouraged you to be the scientist? That was also answered in the slideshow.
I had families and professors that really helped me to know that it was possible to do it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Bruno, any questions, Bruno?
No.
Okay, you already asked your question, right, before. Leo? Oh, Paula has a question before Leo.
What is the biggest mountain have you been to?
So the biggest mountain I've been to is I showed a picture in the slide. It's called Toquirahu in Peru, and it was 6,000 meters. And yeah, that is the biggest mountain I've been to. I've been to other big ones, but this one was the biggest.
Ah, very nice. And you, Leo?
When you were a child, did you want to have a different profession?
When I was young, I really liked skiing, so I wanted to be a ski coach or a sport doctor to be skiing or skiing people. And then I wanted to be an architect. I don't know why. But then since I've been about 15, I knew I wanted to study nature and how the world works. But I didn't know if it would be more sea ice or glaciers or just climate or geology. But I knew I liked the natural world and trying to understand how the earth worked. But I hadn't picked a specific yet. And then the more I did, the more I found my way.
Very nice. Amazing. So I think that's it for today. Thank you very much, Caroline Aubry-Wake.
Thank you.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So let's just take a class picture